Yes, I started this website. I left the New York Times after 13 years and started this website at Yahoo called yahootech.com in January. And I'm pleased to report that last week we had our first 3 million visitor day at Yahoo Tech. So there you go. Thank you. And if you guys would show up, that would be 3,300,000 right there. But I'm not here to talk about that. As some of you may know, I found myself inexplicably the host of a science program. A non-scientist. A straight A student who got only 1 B. And that was in science, that was in chemistry. And it came about in a really strange way. In 2001, the National Science Foundation, which is your government's science branch that gives money to science projects and shows, gave a $3 million grant to NOVA, which is the PBS science show. I don't know if you're aware of this, but NOVA is the second longest continuously running television show in America. You want to know what the number 1 is? General Hospital. Anyway, so they gave NOVA a grant to make a mini-series, not just a half-hour show, a mini-series about materials science. Yeah, that was NOVA's reaction too. You know, so we did what anyone would do. We went to the source of all wisdom, Wikipedia, and we looked it up. Material science is an interdisciplinary field involving the properties, matters, applications of various areas of science and engineering, investigates the relationship between the structure of materials at atomic or molecular scales and their macroscopic properties. A television mini-series? Are you kidding? Oh yeah, it's the next Honey Boo Boo right there. It's going to be huge. So the NOVA people said, you know, put it in the drawer. And that's where it sat for 9 years. So in 2010, they were about to lose the money. And they said, okay, guys, are we going to make this materials science series or not? I don't see how we can do it. It's going to be dry as dust. So they hired this guy, now one of my best friends, Chris Schmidt. He had done television for National Geographic and Discovery and NOVA, and said, fix this. And he said, okay, you can make this series, but you're going to have to make some changes to the NOVA format. First of all, NOVA does not have a host. There's no one on camera. It's just the voice of God narrating the whole thing. So you're going to need a host, and it should be a non-scientist, because I've had hosts for television shows who are scientists, but then you get the scientist interviewing the scientist, and it turns into a pissing match, and they're just like the jargon flies over the audience's head. And third, it's going to be funny. NOVA, God knows, is not known for its comedy. And what we're going to do is we're going to get this host and we're going to subject him to extremely dangerous and life-threatening situations on camera. It'll be great. People will watch that. So this is the show. It's called Making Stuff. The episodes are called Making Stuff Smarter, Making Stuff Stronger, and so on. And I look like the love child of Charlton Heston and Stephen Colbert. I don't know what happened there. But indeed, the idea was to illustrate scientific principles through extremely dangerous situations. So there's a really cool aspect of shark skin. Shark skin, nothing sticks to it. Barnacles, algae, bacteria, nothing will stick to it. And so the marine biologist thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could recreate that in a plastic sheet? You could put it in places where bacteria are a problem, like hospitals, and save thousands of lives. Because right now, how do we kill bacteria in hospitals? With chemicals, right. And as you know from the Purell bottle, you can never kill more than 99.99% of them. You'll always leave some alive, which then multiply and give you worse diseases. So we went to the Bahamas, and under the water I went and felt the sharks to see what was there about the skin. This is me on the right. You may wonder when you see the show why my arms are locked at my sides like this for the whole segment. It's because our scientist, the woman on the left, intended to attract the sharks by waving bloody fish guts in the water. And she said, probably best if you don't wave your hands too. Shark might think you've got, yeah, so let's just, I mean, as you see, it didn't work. The shark came right up into my face. It's like the water around me was like 4 degrees warmer than... I spent a weekend on a nuclear aircraft carrier. That was awesome. You know how you land on that thing? You know, there's a steel cable across the deck and a hook on the back of the plane, and the hook is supposed to catch the rope, the steel cable, and stop you because it's an aircraft carrier. It's not the full length of a runway. And what freaked me out, though, is that as we landed, as we flew down to the deck, where you, at the point you would expect the plane to slow down, it sped up. What are you doing? Do you know why? Because sometimes, 1 out of 10, they miss the rope. And at that point, they'd better be ready to take off again and circle around and land again. Thank you. My son, ladies and gentlemen. No. Never seen him in my life. I went hang gliding to talk about how birds work. I don't even remember what that was. That was, this never made the, oh, by the way, this is what I'm going to do for the next 25 minutes. I'm going to show you stuff that did not get on the show. I'm going to show you behind the scenes, cut stuff. This was, these things went way up my nose, and they would release an odor, and when it was something like orange or blossoms and smelled good, nothing happened. They were, meanwhile, monitoring my brain on an EKG. Then they would give me peanut smell and shock me up the nose. And through repeated exposure to peanuts, they told me that I would walk out of there with a lasting suggestion in my brain that whenever I smelled peanut butter or peanuts, I would become violently ill. Why did I sign up for this? Not only did it not work, but I got shocked for nothing. It never made the show. I ate insects, which they say is the future of nutrition on this planet because they outweigh us in biomass by 20 to 1, and there's lots more of them, and we're just not eating them. I did a show called Nova Science Now that was a spin-off of Making Stuff, where each episode answered one question, or tried to answer a question. This one was, how are we different from other animals? And one of the theories is, we're the only ones who laugh. No other animals laugh. So we spent a day at the Cincinnati Zoo where I was supposed to tickle baby animals. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. So I tickled the elephant, I tickled the penguin, and I thought, so that's the baby penguin, and I thought I had done it. I'm like tickling him, and the thing's going like this, and I'm like, oh my God, I did it! It's human! It's laughing! And this is the zookeeper beside me, and he's like, and I'm like, what? You heard him. He goes, you're not making him laugh. I'm like, I'm not? He goes, you're arousing him. Is there a bathroom somewhere I can... I handled bees. Turns out bee venom is a cancer killer. Astonishingly good at killing cancer cells. All we have to do is get the venom into your body next to the cancer cells to kill them without killing the good cells. They're working on that. I got to fire an AK-47. I'm sure there's some scientific reason for that. I love this stuff, magnetoreological fluid. This is this amazing fluid. It's like motor oil. It's oily and gross. But when you apply a magnetic field to it, it hardens. It turns into like hard clay. And then you take away the magnet, and it turns back into liquid, and it flops down. So if you have an electromagnet controlled by a computer, you can make it harden and soften all the time. So they're putting it in shock absorbers on high-end cars. Your shock absorbers probably are either stiff or loose, and every bump gets the same treatment. But if you have magnetoreological fluid shock absorbers, the computer is controlling the stiffness of the shock for every bump you go over, hundreds of times a second. That's too long a word, so they refer to it as MR fluid, or as I like to call it, Mr. Fluid. This is the idea. This is a clip from the show. How do you make the seat recline anyway? That's without the shocks. Oh my God. That was pretty bouncy. You should sell tickets to this thing.
For round 2, the Humvee gets Lord's shock absorbers. Flexible reactions, built right into the material.
Ah, this is nothing. Same exact road. How do I adjust the AC? So our scientist thought she would play a hilarious joke. After we did this, we went into the lab, and I was to interview her. So she had a little cup of MR fluid in her hand and a magnet under the cup. So she thought it would be a riot if, as I walked in my dress shirt, she pretended to throw this cup of oil on me, but of course the magnet would cause it to stay in the cup, and it would be a hilarious prank on me. This is how that went.
Smoothie comes in gray. Oh my God. Oh my God.
What the hell?
Oh my
I love her. And if you watch the show, you will notice that in the middle of the interview, inexplicably, my shirt changes. Now only you know the reason why. Another thing for Nova Science now, as you may know, 35,000 years ago, just as there are multiple species of penguins and there are multiple species of mosquitoes, there were 4 species of us. There were 4 species of humanoids. There was Neanderthals, you've heard of them, cavemen, and a couple other that died out. I don't remember the names of all of them. But obviously, all of them died out except for us. So when they unraveled the human genome a few years ago, they discovered something rather astonishing. You, all of you, have between 2 and 6% Neanderthal DNA in you. And I don't know about you, but gentlemen, I think that gives us an out when we like leave our underwear on the floor or something. We're like, hey, that's the Neanderthal. I got nothing to do with it. And if you think about it, how could that DNA have gotten into our ancestors? There are children present, please. Yes, they went on a date, yes. So the producers thought it would be hilarious if they made me up to be a Neanderthal with an industrial light and magic makeup artist. 7 hours in the makeup chair. I had to be made up into a Neanderthal. They put these latex pieces. This was the result. And I spent the day walking the streets of San Francisco. They thought it would be hilarious if they filmed people's reactions. There were no reactions. It was San Francisco. In desperation, I finished the day. You never saw this scene either, but I finished the day at the top of the Marriott at the rooftop restaurant there. I used to be a Broadway conductor, so I play the piano. So I was playing cocktail piano up there. Nobody even looked except that one guy, you know. Could I finish my prime rib, please, in peace? Anyway, so wherever I went, I had little cameras, and I would film stuff going on during these interviews. For one of the Making Stuff episodes, we went to this amazing company called Boston Dynamics, just bought by Google for $3.7 gazillion. And I'm doing this interview, and behind me, this guy is just walking around. It has no front, no back, no top, no bottom. It's like their little robo puppy. Walking around in the background. I'm just like, I want 6 of these. Hilarious.
That's amazing. That little critter.
Look at that. I mean, wouldn't you want to be like a scientist who works on that? What we were there to talk about was this guy. This is Alpha Dog. This is developed for the military. And it carries 400 pounds. It has hooves like a horse, and it follows you. You wear this backpack, and it follows the soldier wherever he goes. It can go 20 miles on a fuel tank. And, I mean, right now, our soldiers are in the field carrying these 100-pound packs. By the time they get to the battlefield, they're exhausted, and they're sick, and they're injured. But this would solve that problem. I got to wear the backpack. I got to try it. Scary as God knows what. At one point, I thought it'd be really hilarious if I stopped to tie my shoe to see what happened with the machine. It tore my spine out. No, it was fine. It just stopped and waited. Totally cool. You would not believe what's going on with robotics. Well, maybe you would. You're at the Maker Faire. But, I mean, the military is working on all these. You know what biomimicry is? Biomimicry is imitating nature's ideas and stealing them for our own machines, right? And we're doing that a lot these days. You would never guess by looking at this that this is, in fact, a military robot with camera eyes. And you'd be right. That's a real hummingbird. But this is a military robot with camera eyes. If you take the head off, it looks like that. Completely amazing. They've also developed a Robo Bee. This is 1/30th the weight of a penny, and it actually flies. Oops. Actually flies. Yes. The cable there is only for power. They haven't gotten a battery on there yet that's light enough. But I kept asking these scientists, like, why is the military working so hard on robots that fly and imitate nature? And, I'm thinking, to deliver poison payloads, to spy on the bad guys. And the answer is always the same. Oh, it's for search and rescue. Right. We went to Germany. These guys are really into biomimicry. This company called Festo. Festo, you haven't heard of them, but they are gigantic. They make industrial robots that make your gadgets. So in China, in the factories, it is Festo robots making iPhones and Android phones at this moment. And every year, they do one experiment in biomimicry. This was the jellyfish robot. The entire thing weighs 2 pounds. It's filled with helium, and it's actually remote controlled. You steer it with this, there's a pendulum hanging from the top, and whichever way the pendulum tips, the whole thing flies. Again, this didn't make it onto the show, but it was just so freaking cool, I thought I'd show you. The year before that, they made the RoboSeagull. This thing blew my little brain. It flies the same way as a seagull. It swoops, it dives. It's exactly the same aerodynamics. I mean, don't you want one? It's just so damn cool. One of the coolest biomimicry things we saw is this guy. This is the hagfish. The hagfish is really interesting in the marine world because of its self-defense mechanism. When a predator comes at it and it gets scared, it releases these enormous quantities of slime. Gigantic quantities of slime. And suddenly the predator is less interested in dinner and more interested in just breathing. It's got its gills full of this goop, And so what's really incredible is the hagfish only releases a tiny drop. That little white drop is all that comes out of it. But it mixes with seawater to a ratio of 1 to 99. Seawater, 99% seawater, mixes with that and turns into that slime. Huge buckets full. It's just absolutely amazing. And scientists are looking into hagfish slime, believe it or not, as the potential next fabric of the future. Because it's super, super strong. It has threads running through it that are the strongest known threads in nature. Stronger than spider silk, stronger than Kevlar, stronger than steel per weight. So here's a little clip from the show.
I think the best way to do it is to reach in there and grab one.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Can you crank the volume up a little?
Oh no! I've been slimed! Look at the quantities of this stuff. This is like 3 times the volume of the fish.
It's these spider silk-like threads that have really caught the researchers' attention. They might even serve as a model for a new kind of fiber.
Actual thread made of actual reconstituted fish mucus. The dawn of the era of Hagfish Fabric. Right there.
What would that be like? Nighttime is the right time for a fabric from the deep. Hagware. But its look, don't touch. Or the surprise will be on you. Hagware.
And there are people who've been watching Nova for 40 years who are like, what is this crap? That's not science! Can't please them all. Anyway, we did a show called Making Stuff Colder, which explores temperature from body temperature down to absolute zero through the course of the hour. Amazing show. And one of the first things we did, we spent some time in Alaska in Fairbanks. When I got to Fairbanks, I mean, this is a place that is so cold. The moms are like, kids, it's a beautiful day. Why don't you spend the day outside at the playground? It's only -10. I mean, it is so cold there. I got there, and there are electric plugs popping out of every car. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea Alaska is so green. They have all these electric cars. And everyone's like laughing their butts off at me. And like, that's not an electric car. That's a gas car. But it gets so cold at night that unless you have a heater on around the gas tank, the gasoline will freeze solid. So they have heaters sticking out of every car. This is a place that is so cold that the local fun fair is made entirely of ice. This was the maze for the kids. This is the giant slide, everything out of ice. We make snowmen when it snows. We think we're cool. These guys make ice sculptures in their spare time. And I mean, you've never seen ice sculptures like these. I mean, seriously, how? Little Mermaid fans, there was this one. Grizzly bear. I tried my hand at it. I was okay. Anyway, the reason we were in Fairbanks was because they have a serious problem with the buildings. If you look around Alaska, you'll notice that more and more of these houses are crooked or catty-corner or tipping. And the reason is global warming. Those houses are all built on the permafrost, which is ground that is permanently frozen. But now it's not permanently frozen anymore. During the summer, the permafrost thaws. The water leaks out of the mud, the dirt collapses, and boom, suddenly your house is tipping. So they've tried all kinds of things to stop this problem. They've tried putting giant freezers under your house. They've tried pumping chemicals. And the solution they came up with, since this is the Maker Faire, this is the coolest damn thing I've ever seen. All right, this is a miniature of the invention. It's called a thermosiphon. Thermo meaning heat and siphon meaning siphon. And so it's a tube with a vacuum in it. Now, you know, right, that the higher you go up a mountain, the lower the boiling point of water, right? If you try to boil water, it boils when it's not that hot if you're at high altitude. Well, that's because lower pressure air means slower boiling point. Well, if there's no air, you can make water boil from the heat of your hand. So there's water in there. I put my hands on the bottom. It vaporizes the water just from my hand heat, turns into vapor, rises up the tube to where the cold snow and that copper is, releases the heat, turns back into water, falls down. So taking heat out of the ground, up into the colder air, releasing the heat, dropping back down. The real ones aren't water, they're liquid carbon dioxide. But again, it's the same idea. It's constantly taking taking warmth out of the ground and releasing it to the air. It doesn't require power. It doesn't require maintenance. This is the federal building in Fairbanks. It's been there for 10 years. These are what the real thermosiphons look like. They go down and under the building, keeping the ground frozen year-round. Doesn't require any money or maintenance or electricity, and all the buildings around it are tipping. It's so brilliant. And there's another place where we would probably not want an Alaskan structure to sink into the earth. The Alaskan pipeline. 620,000 thermosiphons. Now you know what those things are. Those are there to keep the ground solid under the pipeline so it doesn't crash. Here's another story that you didn't see. This is Alcor. This is that company in Arizona that for $200,000 a year will keep your dead body frozen for 500 years, 1,000 years, until such time as they've come up with a cure for death. This guy I'm interviewing here. He's the CEO. He is himself a member, although he has opted for the budget plan. You can see the two cans in the back there. There are 17 people in each one of those. Only 4 people in the ones on the right. The ones in the back are the budget plan. That's where they freeze just your head. You may have heard that Ted Williams, the baseball player, has had his head frozen. That's where it is, in that can on the right. I met Ted Williams, sort of. And so I said to this guy, have you ever, in fact, successfully thawed somebody out that you've frozen? And he's British. He's like, no, never done it. I'm like, well, then how do you know you're not just bilking people of $200,000 a year to keep themselves frozen? He goes, well, listen, mate, I'd say in 500 years, when they revive me, they've got maybe a 0.5% chance of being successful. How much chance have you got? I'm like, do you take Amex? No. So anyway, so the story didn't make the show, even though it's super interesting and super creepy. And I told Chris, the producer, I'm like, dude, we went all the way to Arizona to film this. How come you're not putting it in the show? And he goes, because it's a science show. Anyway, here's another one that didn't make the show. It turns out that ski resorts in Europe are also having a problem with global warming. The poles that hold up the chairlifts are beginning to tip, just like those houses in Fairbanks. And so they've tried everything. They've tried, again, chemicals, refrigeration, and finally they've solved the problem in the most unbelievably low-tech way, blankets. They put big white blankets on the ground around those poles. They serve two purposes. They reflect the sunlight, keep the ground cold, and they insulate the ground just like putting a blanket on you would. And so we flew to Austria, all of us, to film a story about these thermal blankets at ski resorts. And we're in the airport in Germany renting our car, and she's like, and where are you going? All my accents sound Indian. I can't help it. I don't know. And we're like, we're going to Innsbruck. And she goes, no, you are not. You're like, why not? And she goes, you didn't hear about the 100-year flood? There was a 100-year flood the day before we got there. The entire mountain was surrounded by water. All the roads were washed out. We couldn't get there. Our thermal camera couldn't get there. The scientists we were there to interview could not get there. So we're like, well, what do we do? Turn around and fly back to America? No! The show must go on. So we quickly got on the phone, and we lined up another ski resort on the other side of the water. Now, this ski resort was not open yet, and they had not deployed the blankets yet, and our scientists wouldn't be able to get there, but we charged ahead. We found the blankets. They were in a shed. Like, oh, this is going to make great TV. So we're like, can we spread out two of them or something? And they're like, yeah, we can unroll a couple. So this is us. Meanwhile, the 100-year flood has turned into the 100-year blizzard. That's what it looked like. You couldn't see 8 feet in front of your face. They got this grad student there on the right to be the interview subject because she works with the scientists. And I'm an amateur skier, so the cameraman thought it'd be a really great opening shot if Fritzi and I were skiing down the mountain, as the opening shot. So we put on our skis, we go over to the... Now, the ski resort is not open yet. The trails have not been skied on or flattened or groomed. It's this deep. It's 50 degrees. It's like tapioca pudding. So she could ski before she could walk. So Fritzi's like, come on, David. She was like, she's gone. And I'm like... it was like, you couldn't move an inch in this stuff. And she stops way down the mountain. She's like, David, you must ski fast or you will sink. I know. I can't see the end of my nose. It was the worst, the worst. 2 hours later, I walked down this mountain. This is me when I got to the bottom. This is my leg. And I go to the cameraman, I'm like, tell me you got something usable. He's like, are you kidding? It was a blizzard. I turned the camera off. So the only thing worse than that was this thing. This was for colder. There's a special chamber that the military has set up to subject soldiers to extreme heat and extreme weather conditions to see what equipment and what practices would help them survive. They made me do it 2 hours on the treadmill in 104-degree heat, wearing 50 pounds on my back. And by the way, they wanted to make sure I was safe. So, of course, they monitored my internal body temperature. How do you suppose they did that? With a thermometer, and not this kind. Yes, that's what she's holding there. That is the United States military, $25 million chamber, and they haven't invented cordless rectal thermometers. The worst. Actually, not the worst. The 104-degree was the bad one. Then the next day, here, I'll show you a little clip.
But this is just the beginning of what Castellani has in store for me. 41 degrees. That's the temperature in the chamber as ice water rains down on me.
So, Dave, we're going to do this for 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So to kind of give you an idea what's going on with you physiologically right now.
I know what's going on with me physiologically. I'm turning into an ice cube.
Yeah.
Castellani and his colleagues developed this procedure not to torture folks, but to solve a mystery. In 1995, a squad of Army Rangers waded through a swamp in Florida. Within hours, 4 died of hypothermia. Yet the temperature was 59 degrees. To understand why they died in such temperate conditions, the Army developed this experiment.
So we're going to have you get back on the treadmill.
What?
So, after my cold shower, a 30-minute march in 15-mile-an-hour wind.
The mimic again, you're outside.
He repeats this.
And we're gonna have it rain on you again.
Over and over.
Suddenly I'm dreaming of the days when it was 104.
Their investigation discovered that it was this combination of wet, cold, and wind that killed the Rangers.
So if you were, say, in 50-degree water and immersed to the...
Anyway, so this is the
We've
ad.
got a need for speed.
They kind of made it up to me by letting me ride on the America's Cup boat. That
new
was
levels of performance. But just how fast can we go? I'm David Pogue, and to find out, I'm taking a wild ride on one of the fastest sailboats on the planet. $100 million of high-tech know-how. For what?
That was such a blast.
win a sailboat race, that's all.
Not just any race, but the America's Cup. These boats are so light and aerodynamic, they go 3 times the speed of the wind. But how?
It might seem crazy, but this sailboat doesn't have a sail. Instead, it has a wing. This boat doesn't sail, it flies.
It
Made
lifts
of
out of the
carbon
water,
fiber,
flies on an
engineered for
underwater
maximum
wing.
Performance.
Unbelievable.
One example
So-
of innovation.
I have to say, we do have pushback when we make these shows. It's not all riding sailboats and having a blast. I get emails like this one. Dear David, your O'Reilly books are great, your New York Times articles are great, your PBS programs are great, but your humor is so bad, I just have to let you know. Try watching as if you're not you. Ouch. And then there's the travel schedule. I mean, this is nuts. This was my 2013. The banners are me out of town, not seeing my kids or my wife. It was grueling. And we have funding problems. The National Science Foundation has announced that they're not going to fund any more science TV. So, yep, no more NOVA money coming from the National Science Foundation. We have no more Pogue shows in the ready right now because we have no money to make them. There's no ads on PBS. We're trying to work around that. But in any case, all these pushback, you have to ask, is it really worth doing all this? And then we get an email like this one. My 7-year-old daughter, Eva, may be one of your biggest fans. Last spring, she got hooked on making stuff. We had to buy the DVD. We watched episodes several times a week for the entire year. Today, we found out you'd be visiting Oklahoma for 5 hours. She talk about nothing but science elements and getting your autograph. Meeting you would be a highlight of her life. So why do we go through all that? This is why. Thank you so much, guys. Great to meet you.